Throughout history, the ultimate tool of tyranny has never been the sword, the tank, or the nuclear warhead. It has always been the ledger. When the global monetary system severed its final link to gold in 1971, the nature of capital shifted fundamentally. Money ceased to be a store of value and transformed into a tool of policy. But that era is now ending. We are currently witnessing a shift far more dangerous than inflation or recession. We are moving from an era of bearer assets where you hold the value to an era of ledger entries where you merely hold a permission slip. We are transitioning from money as property to money as permission. This is not a prediction. This is an engineering schematic. The blueprints for this new reality have already been signed. President Biden's Executive Order 14,067 placed the highest urgency on the research and development of a United States central bank digital currency. Project Hamilton, a collaboration between the Boston Fed and MIT, has already built the code base and proven the technology works. They are not asking if they should build the weapon. They have already placed it on the table. The infrastructure for total financial surveillance is not a distant threat. It went live in July 2023. It is called FedNow. While the public is distracted by market noise, the Federal Reserve has quietly laid the rails for a system where you are allowed to spend only on the things they want, when they want, and where they want. Convenience is the bait, control is the hook. By the end of this analysis, you will understand why the balance in your bank account is technically no longer yours. You will see the track clearly. The only question remaining is, will you find the exit before the gates close? Imagine it is the year 2030. You walk into a grocery store. The environment is sterile, automated, and frictionless. There are no cashiers, only biometric scanners and sleek terminals. You pick up ribeye steak, a bottle of vintage wine, and a bag of coffee beans. You walk to the checkout kiosk, expecting the routine efficiency of modern life. You tap your phone to pay. You wait for the familiar affirmative beep. But instead of a beep, you hear a harsh, low buzz. A red notification flashes across the screen. Transaction denied. You are confused. You know you have money. You've just received your paycheck yesterday. You check your banking app and the balance is there, staring back at you in crisp digital font, $5,000. But next to the balance, there is a small, pulsating alert icon. You tap it, and a message expands, revealing the cold logic of the algorithm. Carbon allowance exceeded for the month of September. Meat products restricted. A cold knot forms in your stomach. It is not a glitch. It is a policy enforcement. You put the steak back on the shelf. You try to buy just the coffee. This time the machine chirps. It works. The transaction clears because coffee does not violate your assigned carbon profile. In that moment, the terrifying clarity hits you. The money in your account is no longer yours. It has been transformed into a voucher system. It is a system of permission. You are allowed to spend it, but only on the things they want, when they want, and where they want. Later that evening, you open your banking app again. You notice something else disturbing. Your savings account balance is lower than it was last week. You haven't spent a dime from that reserve. You check the transaction history and find a recurring charge labeled negative interest rate adjustment. Because the economy has slowed down, the Federal Reserve has decided that saving money is counterproductive to the national recovery. They need velocity of money. They need you to consume. So they are taxing your savings at 1% per month. Your money is rotting like fruit left in the sun. It has an expiration date. If you do not spend it within the designated time frame, it simply vanishes. This creates a psychological prison. You cannot save for your children's education. You cannot build a safety net for a rainy day. You are forced to be a perpetual consumer, running on a treadmill set to a speed you did not choose. This is not a scene from a dystopian sci-fi movie. This is the programmable reality of a central bank digital currency, or CBDC. We are witnessing a fundamental rewriting of the social contract. We are moving from an era of bearer assets to an era of ledger entries. A bearer asset, like physical cash or a gold coin, is something you own simply by holding it. It has value in your hand, independent of any third party. It respects no master. But a CBDC is a ledger entry. It is a liability of the central bank. It is not property. It is the permission slip. The infrastructure to build this reality is not theoretical. It is being laid right now. Most people believe we are just upgrading the banking system to make it faster, to make payments instant. They think this is about convenience, but convenience is the bait. The hook is absolute control, and the trap begins with a mechanism that is already live. To understand the trap, you first have to understand the mechanism. And right now, the mechanism that is successfully confusing the American public is a new service launched by the Federal Reserve called FedNow. Launched in July of 2023, FedNow is marketed as a harmless, necessary revolution in payments. On the surface, the pitch is seductive because it addresses a genuine pain point. If you have ever tried to send a wire transfer on a Friday afternoon, you know the frustration. The money disappears from your account instantly, but it doesn't show up in the recipient's account until Monday or Tuesday. In the age of the internet, where emails are instant and information travels at the speed of light, why does money take 3 days to move? It takes 3 days because the underlying plumbing of the United States banking system, the automated clearinghouse, was built in the 1970s. It is a batch processing system functioning much like a physical mail truck. It only leaves the station once or twice a day. It is slow, outdated, and opaque. FedNow fixes this. It is a real-time gross settlement system that allows banks to settle payments instantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If you send money at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning, it arrives at 3 a.m. in 1 second. So the Federal Reserve says, look, we are just modernizing the rails. We are just helping you get your paycheck faster. And technically, they are telling the truth. FedNow is not a CBDC. It is not a new currency, it is a payment rail. But this is where the sleight of hand occurs. Think of FedNow as the high-speed railway tracks, but think of the CBDC as the train. You cannot run the surveillance train on the old, fragmented, rusty tracks of the 1970 S-Case system. Before the government can introduce a fully digital programmable currency, they first need to condition the population to expect instant digital settlement. More importantly, they need to get every bank in the country plugged into a centralized infrastructure run directly by the Federal Reserve. Before FedNow, banks relied on a mix of private clearinghouses and slow systems. Now the Federal Reserve is positioning itself as the central hub for every instant transaction in the economy. This creates a massive network effect. Once every bank, every merchant, and every employer is hooked into the FedNow system because it is fast and cheap, the infrastructure is set. Switching to a CBDC then becomes incredibly easy. It is no longer a massive logistical overhaul, it is just a software update. FedNow is the Trojan horse. It enters the gates of the financial system bearing the gift of convenience, instant payments and no more waiting. But inside the belly of the horse lies the infrastructure for total control. It creates a direct line of communication between the central bank and the commercial banking layer that never existed before, in real time. It accustoms the public to the idea that the Federal Reserve is a consumer-facing service provider. And once the rails are laid, the train is coming. The trap is technological dependency. By the time the train arrives, the old tracks will have been dismantled, and there will be no other way to move value. But the difference between the money you use today and the money coming on that train is not just about speed. It is about who owns the ledger. And that distinction changes everything about your right to privacy. So, what exactly is the distinction between the digital dollars you currently hold in your Bank of America or Chase app and a central bank digital currency? Why does it matter if the money is digital, given that most of your transactions are already electronic? The difference is not in the format. The difference is in the ledger. Let us dismantle a common and dangerous myth. People often say, I use a credit card for everything. Visa knows what I buy. Biger knows what I browse. Why should I care if the government knows? This is a catastrophic false equivalency. Right now, we operate under a two-tier banking system. When you deposit money at a commercial bank, that deposit is a liability of the private bank. The database that records your transactions belongs to a private company. Yes, the government can access that data, but they face legal friction. They need a warrant, they need a subpoena. There is a legal wall, however thin, between the state and your wallet. With a central bank digital currency, that wall is demolished. A CBDC is a direct liability of the Federal Reserve. The ledger, the list of who owns what and who spent what, is held by the central bank itself. This shift creates a structure known to sociologists as a financial panopticon. The panopticon is a concept of a prison designed by philosopher Jeremy Bentham, where a single guard tower sits in the center and all the cells are arranged in the circle around it. The guard can see into every cell at all times, but the prisoners cannot see the guard, because the prisoners know they might be watched at any moment. They behave as if they are always being watched. With a CBDC, the Federal Reserve gains granular, real-time visibility into every single transaction in the economy. They will not just see aggregate spending data. They will see you. They will know that you bought a bottle of tequila at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. They will know you donated $50 to a controversial political candidate. They will know you bought ammunition or a book about civil disobedience. Currently, cash provides a buffer against this intrusion. Cash is peer-to-peer. Intermediary recording the exchange. It is a private interaction between two free citizens. A CBDC removes the option of privacy entirely. If you think this sounds like paranoia, listen to the architects of the system themselves. Augustin Carstens, the general manager of the Bank for International Settlements, often called the central bank of central banks, said the quiet part out loud. In a video that has now gone viral, he stated quite plainly, we don't know who's using a $100 bill today, and we don't know who's using a 1,000 peso bill today. The key difference with the CBDC is the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability, and we will have the technology to enforce that. Did you catch the specific language he used? Absolute control. Technology to enforce. He is admitting that the objective is not faster payments or economic efficiency. The goal is surveillance and enforcement. They want to map every penny you earn and every penny you spend, because information is power. Once they possess that data, they can build a total profile on you, assessing everything from your carbon footprint to your political alignment. And once they have the data, they move to the next phase, the phase where they stop merely watching what you do with your money and start telling you what you can do with it. This brings us to the scariest chapter of the transition. This is where we move from surveillance to slavery. The unique defining feature of a central bank digital currency is not that it is digital, it is that it is programmable. For thousands of years, money has been a neutral tool. A gold coin does not care who holds it. A gold coin does not care if you use it to buy bread, a weapon, or a banned book. It is an inanimate object that represents value and nothing else. A CBDC is not an inanimate object. It is software code, and code is written with rules. It functions on if-then statements. If the user complies with condition X, then the money performs function Y. Let us look at the 4 specific mechanisms of control this technology enables. Mechanism number 1 is the expiration date. China has already tested this feature with their digital yuan. The central authority can issue money that expires if it is not spent within a certain time frame. Why would they do this? To stimulate the economy by force. If a recession is looming and citizens are saving money out of fear the government can simply issue a stimulus check with the condition, you must spend this within 30 days or it vanishes. This destroys the fundamental function of money as a store of value. You cannot save for the future if your wealth rots like unpicked fruit. It forces you to remain a perpetual consumer, running exactly as fast as the state commands. Mechanism number 2 is negative interest rates. For years, economists have complained about the zero lower bound. They can lower interest rates to 0 to encourage borrowing, but they struggle to go lower because people will simply pull their physical cash out of the bank and put it under a mattress to avoid the penalty. You cannot charge negative interest on physical bills, but if physical cash is banned and you are forced into a digital corral, the Fed can simply press a button and apply a negative 2% rate to your savings account. They can confiscate your wealth automatically to force you to spend. There is no escape valve. Mechanism number 3 is gated spending. This is where the system imposes morality through algorithms. The money can be programmed to work only for specific goods or services. Imagine a world where your carbon footprint is tracked in real time. The government decides you have used too much gasoline this month. You go to the pump, tap your phone, and the transaction fails. Not because you lack funds, but because your funds have been turned off for that specific merchant lake. Or perhaps for the sake of public health, the state decides you cannot buy sugary drinks. Your digital dollar works at the vegetable aisle, but it effectively dies at the soda aisle. Mechanism number 4 is political control. We saw a terrifying preview of this in Canada during the trucker protests. To stop the dissent, the government invoked emergency powers and pressured banks to freeze the accounts of protesters without a court order. They cut citizens off from the financial system to force compliance. With a CBDC, this promise becomes instant and algorithmic. If you are deemed a dissident or if you score too low on a social credit system, your digital wallet can be frozen remotely. You could be exiled from the economy with a single keystroke. You couldn't buy food, you couldn't pay rent, you couldn't buy a bus ticket. This is the ultimate lever of power. It turns money from a tool of freedom into a tool of compliance. It creates a system where you are allowed to exist only as long as you obey. But to make this prison secure, they first have to ensure you have no other way to survive. They have to burn the bridges behind you. If you think this system sounds like paranoia, simply look at the country that is already doing it. If you want to see the future of the US financial system, you must look east. China is years ahead in the development of its CBDC. The ECYuan, or digital yuan, they have not just built the currency, they have integrated it seamlessly into the apps. Citizens use daily like WeChat and Alipay, but more importantly, they have closed the loop between finance and behavior. In China, the digital currency is the enforcer of the social credit system. If your score drops, perhaps because you jaywalked, played video games too long, or posted a criticism of the government online, you face immediate real-world consequences. You are banned from buying plane tickets. You are restricted from high-speed trains. Your internet speed is throttled. The CBDC is the final piece of this puzzle, giving the state granular control over the economic life of every citizen. Western central bankers look at China not with horror, but with envy. They see the efficiency. They see the power. Neil Kashkari, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, famously admitted this capability in a moment of candor. He stated, "I can see why China would do it. If they want to monitor every one of your transactions, you can do that with a CBDC. You can't do that with Venmo. If you want to impose negative interest rates, you can do that with a CBDC. You can't do that with Venmo." He questions why the US would do it, playing the skeptic, but he explicitly validates the mechanism. CBDCs allow for negative rates and total monitoring in a way private apps never can. But before they can trap you in this digital system, they have to kill the analog alternative. They have to kill cash. The war on cash is already underway, and it is fighting on 3 distinct fronts. Step 1 is friction. Banks are closing branches at a record pace. Have you tried to withdraw $5,000 in physical cash recently? They treat you like a suspect. They ask what it is for. They make you fill out forms. They make you wait. They are intentionally adding friction to the physical world to push you into the digital world. Step 2 is legal limitation. Countries around the world are aggressively lowering the cap on legal cash transactions. In France, it is illegal to pay more than 1,000 euros in cash. In Israel, restrictions are tightening. In the UK, cash acceptance is being removed from public transport. The narrative is always the same. Cash is for criminals and tax evaders. Good citizens use digital. Step 3 is inflation. This is the invisible killer. As inflation destroys the purchasing power of the dollar, physical bills become less useful. A $100 bill today buys what a $20 bill bought a few decades ago. Yet the Treasury refuses to print $500 or $1,000 bills. They keep the denominations small to make carrying large amounts of value physically difficult. To buy a used car in cash today, you need a backpack. It becomes impractical. This is a coordinated effort to herd the sheep into the digital pen. So how do they execute the final switch? History tells us that crisis is always the catalyst for control. The blueprint is clear. Wait for the next major financial crash or inflationary spike. The population will be desperate. The government will offer a solution. universal basic income or emergency stimulus checks. But there will be a catch. To receive the funds instantly, you must download the Fed's digital wallet. It will be framed as relief, but it will be the handshake of a permanent dependency. Once the majority accepts the wallet, the trap snaps shut. This leaves us with a stark choice. The cage is built, the rails are live, the legislation is written. The transition to a digital currency is the single largest shift in the monetary system since 1971, and it changes the fundamental relationship between the citizen and the state. It turns the citizen from a master into a subject. Technology in itself is neutral. It could be used to stop corruption, to track government spending in real time, or to create transparency for the elites. But history teaches us a brutal lesson. Power never uses surveillance to watch itself. It uses surveillance to watch you. Do not make the mistake of thinking this system will fail due to incompetence. The transition is inevitable. The machinery is too advanced, and the incentives for control are too high. The only variable remaining in this equation is your participation. You can drift into the convenience of the digital pen, or you can brief the own independence. You can choose to be a subject in their ledger, or a sovereign with your own bearer assets. History creates victims, and it creates students. Which one are you? If you want to understand how the trap was first set, watch this video on how the gold standard was actually stolen.